The humid air of late July clung to the city, heavy and thick, a palpable blanket of heat that refused to lift even after sundown, settling instead like a suffocating shroud over the asphalt and brick. On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday night in 1997, under the hazy, yellowish glow of streetlights struggling valiantly against the oppressive darkness that often swallowed the corners of Houston's Third Ward, an unimaginable terror began to unfold. A young woman, vibrant and full of dreams, brimming with the promise of a future she had meticulously carved for herself, vanished without a trace, swallowed whole by the urban night, leaving behind only the ghost of her laughter and the chilling silence of her absence. Decades later, the echoes of her disappearance would ripple through the community once more, shattering a fragile peace with an arrest so shocking, so utterly unfathomable, it begged a chilling question that pierced the very soul of the city. How well do we truly know the monsters lurking in plain sight, living among us, smiling and shaking hands? As these shadows lengthen and the weight of decades of unanswered prayers bears down, how do we, as a society, confront the darkest truths that lie buried beneath years of silence, indifference, and a suffocating veil of communal trust betrayed? Pause for a moment. Consider where you are right now as this unfolding story from the heart of a vibrant community reaches out across time and space. And if you find yourself drawn into these profound depths, if this tale stirs something within you that yearns for justice and understanding, please consider subscribing. Pause for a moment. Consider where you are right now as this unfolding story from the heart of a vibrant community reaches out across time and space. And if you find yourself drawn into these profound depths, if this tale stirs something within you that yearns for justice and understanding, please consider subscribing. Your support fuels this channel, allowing us to delve ever deeper, to bring more forgotten voices, more chilling mysteries from the darkest corners of history into the much-needed light. It truly makes all the difference in our relentless pursuit of these somber narratives. It was July 22, 1997, a date forever etched, not merely in the calendars, but into the very fabric of the collective memory of the Jenkins family and the close-knit, deeply spiritual community that surrounded them. Sarah Jenkins, at 23 years old, was far more than just a young woman. She was a beacon of hope, a vibrant testament to ambition, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to service. A recent, proud graduate of Texas Southern University, a historically Black university nestled right in the heart of Houston, she held a hard-earned degree in education, her diploma a tangible symbol of countless late nights spent poring over textbooks under the soft glow of a desk lamp, fueled by the unwavering belief in the transformative power of knowledge. She was meticulously preparing to embark on her first year as an elementary school teacher at a Riverside Elementary, a cherished institution located just a few blocks from her childhood home, a place where she herself had once sat, wide-eyed and eager, dreaming of the future. Her life was a rich tapestry woven with threads of dedication and compassion. Long, selfless hours spent volunteering at the local community center, patiently tutoring younger children in the intricacies of math and the wonders of reading, her gentle encouragement a constant presence in their lives. And every Sunday, her melodious, soaring voice was a cherished staple in the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church choir, lifting spirits and filling the sanctuary with a profound sense of grace. She was not merely a young woman embarking on her career. She was a promise personified, a future brimming with potential, a living, breathing testament to the resilience, the intelligence, and the indomitable spirit of her beloved community. That particular Tuesday evening, as the last vestiges of a blistering summer sun began to recede, painting the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft lavender, Sarah had left her parents' unassuming but immaculately kept home on Del Monte Street around 8:30 p.m. Her destination, as it was every Tuesday, was a Bible study group at her church, a routine she had observed with unwavering devotion since her teenage years, a quiet anchor in her busy week. She typically walked the short 5 blocks, a path well-trodden and intimately familiar since childhood. Each crack in the sidewalk, each leaning fence post, a part of her mental map. The route wound its way past old, sturdy oak trees whose ancient branches drooped low, their leaves rustling softly in the barely perceptible breeze, past modest, well-kept houses with porch lights casting soft, welcoming glows, and through the quiet, contented hum of a neighborhood settling down for the night, the distant murmur of televisions and the occasional bark of a dog providing the soundtrack. Her mother, Eleanor Jenkins, a woman whose every movement exuded warmth and quiet strength, remembered waving goodbye from the porch, a casual, loving gesture, her hand raising instinctively as Sarah reached the sidewalk. "Be safe, baby," she'd called out, her voice a soft maternal whisper carried on the thick air, a phrase uttered countless times over Sarah's 23 years, laden with a mother's inherent, ever-present anxieties for her child in a world that could be, at times, inexplicably cruel and unforgiving. Sarah had responded with her characteristic bright, infectious smile, a flash of pure joy that lit up her face, and waved back, her figure silhouetted against the fading light before she disappeared around the corner into the encroaching twilight. It was a fleeting, unremarkable moment, yet it would forever be seared into Eleanor's memory as the last time she would ever see her cherished daughter alive. By 10 p.m., when the hands of the antique clock in their living room had silently swept past the hour and Sarah had still not returned, Eleanor felt an insistent prickle of unease begin to bloom in her chest. Sarah, known for her meticulous punctuality, her thoughtful consideration for others, was never late without calling. Never. A quick, increasingly frantic call to the church confirmed Eleanor's burgeoning fears. Sarah had never arrived at Bible study. A cold, heavy knot began to form deep in Eleanor's stomach, a visceral premonition of dread that no parent ever wants to acknowledge, a silent scream building behind her lips. Her husband, James Jenkins, a man of quiet strength, unwavering faith, and a deep, resonant voice, initially tried to reassure her, his own voice attempting a calm that didn't quite reach his eyes. "She probably just stopped to talk to someone, honey. You know how Sarah is, always helping, always lending an ear." But even his words, meant to soothe, held an undeniable tremor of worry, a subtle crack in his composure. By midnight, with the silence of the house growing heavier and more profound, with no word, no call, no sign of their beloved daughter, a Jenkins family, along with a rapidly growing number of concerned neighbors and fellow church members who had been alerted, began a frantic, increasingly desperate search. They walked the familiar 5 blocks again and again, their flashlights cutting trembling arcs through the oppressive, inky darkness, their voices growing hoarser and more strained with each repeated cry of Sarah's name, their hopes dwindling, evaporating into the humid night air with each unanswered call. The scent of night-blooming jasmine, usually a comforting aroma, now felt cloying, almost mocking in its sweetness against the bitterness of their rising despair. The Houston Police Department was contacted in the early hours of July 23rd, the first tendrils of dawn just beginning to paint the eastern sky. The initial response, as is often the unfortunate case in missing persons reports involving adults, was tinged with a dismissive degree of skepticism, a bureaucratic weariness that felt like a fresh wound to the already bleeding hearts of the Jenkins family. "She's probably just run off, ma'am," a weary, unsympathetic officer suggested over the phone, his tone almost perfunctory, a casual dismissal that Eleanor would never, for the rest of her life, forget or forgive. He spoke of statistical probabilities, of adult freedoms, of the myriad reasons young people sometimes chose to simply disappear. But Sarah Jenkins wasn't the type to run off. She was deeply rooted in her community, profoundly connected to her family, fiercely dedicated to her aspirations, and meticulously responsible. Her parents vehemently stressed this, their voices shaking with a mixture of grief and indignation, painting a vivid, detailed portrait of their daughter's impeccable character, her educational aspirations, her unwavering commitment to her family and her community. They spoke of her college achievements, her volunteer work, her steadfast presence in their lives. Their insistence, coupled with the immediate and widespread community mobilization, neighbors, friends, church members, and even former students organizing spontaneous search parties, plastering missing posters, bearing Sarah's radiant, hopeful smile across every lamppost and storefront in the entire Third Ward, eventually compelled the police to escalate their efforts, to move Sarah's file from the bottom of the pile to something resembling an active investigation. The local news channels began to pick up the story, Sarah's face flashing across television screens, a silent plea for information. Days bled into a week, then two. The initial frantic energy of the search slowly morphed into a grim, enduring determination. The scope of the search grew wider, encompassing the sprawling green spaces of Houston's parks, the desolate, overgrown expanses of abandoned lots, and the murky, labyrinthine bayous that snaked silently through the city, dark veins on its humid skin. The air remained stifling, a constant, oppressive presence, a physical manifestation of the stifling anxiety that choked the community, a collective held breath. Every phone call, every knock on the door, every unfamiliar vehicle cruising slowly down their street sent a jolt of panicked hope through the Jenkins household, only to be followed by the crushing weight of renewed disappointment. On August 5th, nearly 2 excruciating weeks after Sarah had vanished into the humid Houston night, a utility worker, performing routine maintenance on power lines, stumbled upon a human body in a wooded, desolate area near the banks of Brays Bayou, several miles south of the Third Ward. The location was remote, overgrown with thick brush and tangled vines, a forgotten patch of wilderness where secrets could easily be swallowed by nature in time. The discovery sent a jolt of ice through the already raw nerves of Houston, a collective gasp of horror echoing through the city. The initial description, relayed through grim-faced police spokespersons, matched Sarah, a young Black woman, petite frame, wearing clothing similar to what Eleanor had painstakingly described. The world, for the Jenkins family, tilted violently on its axis, shattering into a million irreparable pieces. The identification process was an agonizing, drawn-out ordeal, a cruel confirmation of their worst, most terrifying fears. It was Sarah. Her body, subjected to the relentless elements and the passage of time in the unforgiving August heat, offered limited immediate forensic clues, a devastating blow to the investigators. The medical examiner's report, delivered with somber professionalism, confirmed what everyone had already suspected. She had died from blunt force trauma to the head and neck, a brutal, violent end. However, the precise instrument used to inflict the fatal blows remained elusive, leaving a gaping hole in the emerging narrative of her final moments. There were also clear signs of a desperate struggle, defensive wounds marring her forearms, suggesting a courageous, harrowing fight for survival against her assailant, a testament to her strength even in the face of overwhelming odds. The crime scene itself, despite meticulous processing, yielded little in the way of immediate, actionable evidence. No clear footprints beyond those of the utility worker and first responders, no discarded weapon gleaming ominously in the undergrowth, just the hushed, mournful whispers of the wind through the trees and the overwhelming, suffocating grief that now permeated everything, clinging to the air like a noxious fog. The initial investigation was a whirlwind of activity, a frantic, desperate scramble fueled by public outrage and the sheer, unquantifiable tragedy of a promising young life brutally extinguished. Detectives canvassed the Third Ward with renewed vigor, knocking on every door, interviewing every potential witness, no matter how remote their connection might seem. They spoke to Sarah's myriad friends, her dedicated colleagues at the community center, her fellow church members, everyone who had known and loved her. Each conversation, each recollection painted a consistent, unwavering portrait. Sarah was universally loved, deeply respected, and, crucially, without enemies. There was no secret boyfriend, no hidden vices, no whispers of anyone who might wish her harm or bear her ill will. The overwhelming consensus was that Sarah was, simply put, good. The profound lack of a clear motive, combined with the devastating absence of a viable suspect, quickly turned the case into a baffling, infuriating enigma, a Gordian knot that seemed impossible to untie. The Houston Police Department assigned a team of seasoned homicide detectives to the case, their faces grim, their determination palpable. Yet, despite their best efforts, leads dwindled rapidly, fading like whispers in the wind. The limited forensic capabilities of 1997 meant that DNA evidence, while diligently collected and carefully preserved, could not yield the kind of immediate, precise breakthroughs that would become common in later decades with the advent of more advanced scientific techniques. Fingerprints were lifted from potential contact points, from the sparse items found near the body, but they belonged either to Sarah herself or were smudged, partial, and degraded beyond any hope of positive identification. The dense, unforgiving foliage at the crime scene had obscured crucial evidence, acting as a natural accomplice to the perpetrator, and the agonizing passage of time before the body's discovery had further complicated matters, allowing the elements to degrade and erase vital clues. The initial sense of urgent, breathless activity slowly gave way to the grim, disheartening reality of a cold case in the making, another file destined for the somber archives of unsolved mysteries. The community, initially united in their urgent search and subsequent profound mourning, found itself struggling with a corrosive mixture of fear, frustration, and a growing sense of vulnerability. Who would do this to Sarah, their shining star, their hope for the future? Was it a stranger, a random, senseless act of violence that shattered the illusion of safety they had cherished? Or, far more terrifyingly, was it someone known, someone who had infiltrated their trusting, close-knit circle, a wolf in sheep's clothing living among them? Paranoia began to creep in, a subtle, insidious poison that eroded the foundations of neighborly trust. Neighbors looked at each other with newly speculative, guarded eyes. Every unfamiliar car, every shadowed figure lingering a moment too long became a potential threat, a harbinger of unseen danger. The vibrant laughter that once filled the streets of the Third Ward, the easy camaraderie, grew quieter, replaced by an underlying hum of apprehension, a constant, low-grade thrum of fear that colored every interaction. Businesses suffered, community events saw lower turnout, and a shadow of suspicion fell over the once bright, resilient neighborhood. Eleanor and James Jenkins, however, infused with a faith that transcended even the deepest despair, refused to let Sarah's memory fade into the cold, impersonal annals of unsolved crimes. They became relentless, tireless advocates for their daughter, their grief transmuted into an unshakable resolve. They attended every community meeting, their voices clear and strong amidst the sorrow, speaking to every reporter who would listen, ensuring that Sarah's luminous face, her inspiring story, and the brutal injustice of her death remained at the forefront of the public consciousness. They organized candlelight vigils that drew hundreds, their collective sorrow and determination illuminating the Houston nights, casting long, dancing shadows that symbolized both their pain and their unwavering hope. They established the Sarah Jenkins Scholarship Fund at Texas Southern University, a living legacy ensuring that even in death, her spirit of education, community upliftment, and relentless pursuit of knowledge continued to inspire and empower future generations. Their unwavering faith, though tested to its very core by the unspeakable tragedy, was never broken. They believed with every fiber of their being, with an almost primal certainty, that justice for Sarah would eventually, inevitably come. Years turned into decades, each one a relentless march of time that dulled the edges of memory for some, but only deepened the ache for the Jenkins family. The initial fervor of the investigation cooled, slowly transforming Sarah's case into a thick, dusty file among thousands in the Houston Police Department's cold case unit. Detectives retired, their institutional knowledge walking out the door with them, and new ones took their places, their focus inevitably drawn to the relentless tide of new crimes, new tragedies. The precise institutional memory of the Sarah Jenkins case slowly receded, becoming a faint echo in crowded hallways, replaced by the pressing urgency of the present. But for the Jenkins family and for countless others in the Third Ward, Sarah's absence remained a gaping, unhealing wound, a constant, agonizing ache that defied the simple passage of time. Every birthday, every holiday, every graduation ceremony for nieces and nephews served as a stark, painful reminder of the future that had been so cruelly stolen from her and from them. The empty chair at the dinner table, the unworn graduation gown still hanging in her closet, the books she had planned to read to her first class, each was a silent scream of what might have been. Technological advancements, however, were slowly but surely transforming the very landscape of criminal forensics, quietly, diligently working in the background. DNA analysis, once a nascent experimental science, evolved into an incredibly powerful, precise tool, capable of extracting viable genetic profiles from even minute, degraded biological samples, turning what was once impossible into routine. In 2018, nearly 21 agonizing years after Sarah's brutal murder, the Houston Police Department's Cold Case Unit, spurred by a new, aggressive initiative to revisit older, particularly egregious unsolved homicides that had deeply impacted communities, pulled Sarah Jenkins' thick, yellowed file from the deepest recesses of the archives. Detective Marcus Thorne, a meticulous investigator known for his quiet tenacity, his unwavering commitment to every detail, and his almost obsessive dedication to giving victims a voice, was assigned as the lead. Thorne was a man who understood the profound weight of these cold cases, the agonizing burden carried by the families left behind. Thorne began by meticulously reviewing every single piece of evidence collected back in 1997. He pored over brittle crime scene photos, detailed typewritten reports, faded witness statements, each document a ghost of a past tragedy. He noted the mention of a small, almost imperceptible skin fragment found beneath Sarah's fingernail, a testament to her desperate final struggle. This piece of evidence, barely a millimeter in size, had been carefully preserved, almost miraculously, in a tiny labeled vial, though its significance and utility back then was severely limited by the scientific understanding of the era. Now, with the advent of advanced forensic techniques, it represented a potential key, a whisper from the past. Thorne, a man not easily swayed by false hope, but always driven by possibility, ordered the fragment, along with other potential biological samples from the original evidence log, to be resubmitted for cutting-edge, advanced DNA analysis. The hope was slender, a tiny flickering flame against the vast darkness of 21 years, but it was there, and it was enough to drive him forward. The waiting period that followed was, for the Jenkins family, an excruciating test of their already frayed resilience. They had lived through so many false hopes, so many moments where justice had seemed tantalizingly within reach, only to slip away like sand through their fingers. They had learned to guard their hearts, to temper their expectations. But this time, as they spoke with Detective Thorne, something felt subtly, profoundly different. Perhaps it was the calm, unwavering confidence of the detective, his respectful demeanor, or perhaps it was the sheer weight of time that had passed, bringing with it the undeniable promise of new solutions, new scientific miracles that had once been unimaginable. Then, in late 2019, almost a year after the resubmission, the long-awaited call came, shattering the quiet routine of the Jenkins lives. The lab had managed, against all odds and the challenges of degradation, to extract a viable, complete DNA profile from the tiny skin fragment. It was a male profile, distinct and clear, a silent scream of identity from the grave. The next critical step was to compare this newly acquired genetic profile against national databases, including the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, a comprehensive, ever-growing repository of DNA samples from convicted offenders and unsolved crime scenes across the country. The initial CODIS search, however, yielded no immediate match. The perpetrator, it seemed, had never been convicted of a felony crime that would have required his DNA to be entered into the system. It was a disheartening setback, a momentary plunge into familiar despair, but Detective Thorne, ever the pragmatist, knew it was not an insurmountable one. Thorne, undeterred by this initial roadblock, immediately explored a newer, cutting-edge avenue that was rapidly revolutionizing cold case investigations: forensic genetic genealogy. This revolutionary technique involves uploading the unknown DNA profile to public genealogy databases, the very same ones millions of people use every day to trace their ancestry, to discover their roots, and to connect with distant relatives, with the specific goal of finding familial connections, however distant, to the suspect. By meticulously building a vast, intricate family tree from these distant relatives, painstakingly tracing each branch and twig, skilled genealogists can narrow down the immense pool of potential suspects to a much smaller, manageable group, sometimes even identifying the perpetrator directly through their genetic lineage. It was a painstaking, incredibly labor-intensive process, often requiring months, sometimes even years, of dedicated, precise research, akin to finding a single specific thread in a giant tangled tapestry. For nearly a year, a dedicated team of forensic genealogists, working in close conjunction with Detective Thorne and his cold case unit, meticulously, obsessively pieced together an intricate family tree from the minute DNA fragments, a genetic roadmap spanning generations. They followed ancestral lines across decades and states, cross-referenced countless public records, dusty obituaries, faded census data, old newspaper articles buried in microfiche, and even historical photographs. Slowly, painstakingly, with the precision of master craftsmen, a potential suspect began to emerge from the shadows of history, his identity coalescing from scattered data points. The compelling familial links pointed strongly and consistently towards one individual, Michael "Mike" Henderson. The name, when it finally registered, hit Detective Thorne with a profound force he hadn't anticipated, a gut punch that left him momentarily breathless. Mike Henderson. The name resonated deeply, powerfully, within the collective consciousness of the Third Ward. Henderson wasn't some anonymous stranger, some shadowy figure from the periphery of society. He was a pillar of the community, a seemingly indispensable part of its very foundation. A successful local businessman, he owned a popular, bustling barber shop just blocks from the Jenkins home, a place where men gathered to talk politics, sports, and neighborhood gossip. The rhythmic snip of scissors a constant, comforting sound. He was known for his impeccably tailored suits, his booming, hearty laugh that filled any room he entered, and his extensive charitable work, always seemingly the first to offer help or organize a fundraiser. He coached youth basketball at the very community center Sarah had volunteered at, his encouraging shouts echoing through the gymnasium. Most astonishingly, he was a respected, long-serving deacon at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, the very church Sarah attended, where he often led powerful prayers, offered poignant comfort during times of sorrow, and dispensed wise counsel to congregants. He had even been one of the many mourners, his face etched with apparent grief, who had offered profound condolences to Eleanor and James Jenkins at Sarah's funeral all those years ago, wrapping his arms around them, offering words of comfort in Scripture. He was, to all outward appearances, a man of God, a respected elder, an embodiment of the community's strength, its virtue, its unwavering moral compass. The revelation was astounding, almost utterly unbelievable, a twisting knife of betrayal. Thorne, haunted by the implications, double-checked every single piece of genealogical data, every public record, every tiny detail. The evidence, however, was compelling, consistent, and irrefutable. Armed with this damning information, HPD immediately obtained a covert search warrant to collect a DNA sample from Michael Henderson without his knowledge, a delicate operation designed to confirm the genetic genealogy findings. This was a profoundly sensitive operation, requiring meticulous planning, precise timing, and flawless execution to avoid tipping off a man who had successfully evaded justice for over 2 decades, living a brazen double life. A discarded coffee cup from a local diner he frequented, a used napkin from a community barbecue, a cigarette butt, any item he had recently touched could potentially yield the necessary sample. The opportunity finally arose when Henderson attended a local community outreach event where an undercover officer, with practiced discretion, subtly collected a cup he had used and casually discarded in a public trash receptacle. The tension surrounding the collection was palpable, a silent thrum of anticipation. The results from the forensic lab came back swiftly with a speed that belied the 2 decades of waiting. The DNA profile from the discarded cup was an exact, undeniable match to the DNA found beneath Sarah Jenkins' fingernail. The match probability was astronomically high, virtually irrefutable, a scientific certainty that left no room for doubt. After 23 agonizing years, the identity of Sarah Jenkins' killer was finally, undeniably known. It was not a stranger from the periphery, not a transient passing through the city, but a man deeply embedded within the very fabric of the community, a man who had stood shoulder to shoulder with her grieving family, offering false sympathy, leading prayers, living a monstrous, brazen lie. The arrest of Michael Henderson, then 65 years old, a figure of seemingly unblemished respectability, on a bright, sunny morning in February 2021, sent shockwaves not only through the Third Ward, but across the entire city of Houston, reverberating far beyond its geographical boundaries. News vans, their satellite dishes gleaming, descended upon Henderson's now shuttered barbershop, their cameras rolling, capturing the raw, immediate reactions. Local residents gathered in bewildered, weeping clusters, their faces etched with a profound mixture of disbelief, sorrow, anger, and a deep, aching sense of betrayal. The story dominated local news for weeks, then national headlines, a chilling tale of hidden evil. The phrase "Black community stunned by arrest" was not mere sensationalism, not a fleeting journalistic flourish. It was an accurate, devastating reflection of the profound emotional and psychological trauma inflicted by this horrifying revelation. For many, it was an unimaginable, unforgivable betrayal. How could someone so revered, so outwardly benevolent, so seemingly virtuous, harbor such unspeakable darkness, such a capacity for brutality? The sheer audacity of his charade, living a seemingly normal, upright life, attending church services, coaching children, building a reputation of impeccable standing, all while the specter of Sarah's brutal murder hung like a suffocating cloud over the community, was almost too much to comprehend, too monstrous to integrate into their understanding of the world. People who had known Henderson for decades, who had sat in his barber chair, who had listened to his sermons, recounted stories of his kindness, his unwavering wisdom, his constant, reassuring presence in their lives. The jarring dissonance between the man they thought they knew, the figure of authority and comfort, and the monster he now appeared to be was profoundly unsettling, creating a deep, painful sense of cognitive disarray, shattering their understanding of good and evil. Eleanor and James Jenkins received the earth-shattering news with a complex, overwhelming mixture of profound relief and a new, agonizing layer of pain. Relief that Sarah's killer had finally been identified, that their long, arduous 23-year fight for justice had not been in vain, that their daughter's voice, though silenced, had finally been heard. But the pain, incredibly, was sharper, more acute, more deeply cutting than ever before, precisely because the perpetrator was someone they knew, someone they had trusted implicitly, someone who had looked them directly in the eye, their face a mask of false sympathy, and offered comfort during their absolute darkest hour. It was a new, insidious layer of trauma, a betrayal that cut deeper than the initial loss, eroding the very foundation of their trust in humanity. Eleanor wept, tears streaming down her face, not just for Sarah, for a beautiful life stolen, but for the shattered innocence of their entire comunidad, for a sacred trust that had been so cruelly, so utterly abused. James, usually stoic, simply held his wife, his own silent tears a testament to the raw, renewed anguish. The narrative of that fateful night began to unfold slowly, painstakingly, during Henderson's initial interrogation and the subsequent intensified investigation. While Henderson steadfastly, defiantly denied the charges, maintaining a chilling facade of innocence, the irrefutable DNA evidence was overwhelming, a silent, damning witness that spoke louder than any words. Detectives, reinvigorated by the breakthrough, began to re-interview witnesses from 1997, those who remembered the smallest details, the seemingly insignificant observations that might now, in this new, terrifying context, take on profound new meaning. A few fragments began to coalesce, painting a chilling, disturbing picture of Henderson's hidden nature. One distant relative of Henderson, who had moved away from Houston decades ago, recalled a brief, uncomfortable conversation with Henderson around the time of Sarah's murder. Henderson had mentioned, somewhat dismissively, that Sarah was too proud for her own good, that she needed to be taken down a peg, a thinly veiled resentment cloaked in casual conversation. At the time, the relative, hearing it from a respected community member, had dismissed it as a casual, albeit distasteful remark, an offhand comment in passing. Now, in horrifying retrospect, it was a sinister, chilling premonition of the violence to come. Another witness, an elderly woman named Martha Lewis, who lived 2 blocks from the Jenkins family and who possessed a remarkably keen memory for detail despite her age, vaguely remembered seeing Henderson's distinctive bright red pickup truck parked several blocks away from Sarah's usual church route on the humid night of her disappearance. She hadn't thought anything of it then, as Henderson was a common, recognizable sight in the neighborhood, his truck a familiar presence. She had simply assumed he was visiting someone, perhaps making a house call for a congregant. Her memory, once a vague, half-forgotten whisper, now screamed with chilling clarity, a terrifying piece of the puzzle falling into place. The psychological profile that emerged from these fragments, combined with the brutal nature of the crime and Henderson's decades-long deception, suggested a deeply disturbed individual, a cunning predator capable of meticulously maintaining a sophisticated, utterly convincing facade of respectability. Henderson, it appeared, harbored a hidden, venomous resentment, perhaps a profound sense of male entitlement, or a deeply ingrained predatory impulse carefully concealed behind his veneer of piety and community service. Sarah, with her bright intellect, her confident demeanor, her unwavering independence, and her vibrant life, may have inadvertently triggered this dark hidden side of him, representing everything he secretly resented or desired to control. Sarah, with her bright intellect, her confident demeanor, her unwavering independence, and her vibrant life, may have inadvertently triggered this dark hidden side of him, representing everything he secretly resented or desired to control. The precise interaction that led to her abduction might never be fully known, forever locked in the mind of her killer. But investigators theorized a chance encounter, a predatory opportunity seized with terrifying swiftness and cold calculation. Perhaps Henderson, a man she knew and trusted implicitly, had offered Sarah a ride, a seemingly innocuous gesture from a respected community elder, a seemingly kind offer on a dark, humid night. Perhaps he had cornered her on a dark stretch of her walk, his true, monstrous intentions emerging with terrifying swiftness, shattering her world in an instant. The defensive wounds on Sarah's arms spoke volumes of her courageous, desperate fight, her refusal to succumb without resistance. The blunt force trauma suggested a sudden, brutal attack designed to incapacitate quickly, to silence her struggles. He likely then transported her, alive or barely clinging to life, to the secluded, overgrown bayou area, a place chosen for its isolation and its ability to conceal secrets. He may have returned to the scene hours or even days later to try and obscure further evidence, or perhaps simply abandoned her there, convinced he had erased his tracks and ensured his freedom, confident in his ability to resume his double life without detection. The community, once so tight-knit and resilient, wrestled profoundly with a devastating aftermath. Group therapy sessions were hastily organized at the church and community center, places that once offered only solace, now offering spaces for collective processing of trauma. Pastors preached sermons of healing, of forgiveness, but also, crucially, of vigilance and the complex, insidious nature of evil, reminding congregants that darkness could reside anywhere. Children who had once looked up to Mike Henderson as a wise, benevolent role model, a respected figure whose kind words they cherished, now grappled with the terrifying, incomprehensible realization that their hero was, in fact, a villain, a monster who walked among them. The barbershop, once a vibrant hub of conversation, laughter, and camaraderie, now stood empty, its windows dark, a stark, silent monument to shattered trust, a painful reminder of betrayal. The case of Sarah Jenkins also illuminated a broader, more insidious pattern that advocates had been tirelessly highlighting for years: the systemic issue of underreporting and the often alarmingly slow, marginalized resolution of crimes against Black women and girls in America. For years, dedicated activists and organizations had highlighted the pervasive biases within law enforcement, the painful reality that such cases often fail to garner the same sustained, urgent attention, the same dedicated resources as those involving white victims. Sarah's case, cold for decades, her family's pleas often met with polite but ultimately dismissive responses, resonated deeply with countless other families who felt their loved ones' disappearances and murders had been similarly marginalized, relegated to the back burner of public and investigative interest. Her eventual resolution, while bringing undeniable, profound closure to her family, also served as a painful, stark reminder of the many other unresolved stories, the many other families still waiting, still fighting, still yearning for justice for their own lost loved ones. It sparked renewed calls for systemic change, for equitable allocation of resources, and for a deeper, more empathetic understanding of the unique vulnerabilities faced by Black women and girls. The trial of Michael Henderson was finally set for late 2022, a culmination of decades of anguish and detective work. The prosecution's case, meticulously constructed, was built primarily on the irrefutable DNA evidence, a scientific anchor that could not be swayed. This powerful scientific proof was bolstered by the re-examined witness testimonies, the small, crucial details that now, in light of the DNA match, took on immense significance. It was also strengthened by the sheer, audacious weight of Henderson's deceptive 2-decade-long double life, a betrayal that spoke volumes about his character. The defense, predictably, attempted to cast doubt on the integrity of the DNA collection methods, on the reliability of decades-old memories, and sought to paint Henderson as a respected community leader unjustly targeted. But the scientific evidence was too powerful, too precise, too conclusive to be easily dismissed. During the emotionally charged proceedings, Eleanor Jenkins testified, her voice trembling with emotion but unwavering in its resolve, recounting the agonizing wait, the years of unanswered prayers, and the profound, relentless sorrow that had become their constant companion. Her words painted a vivid picture of a mother's unending grief, her daughter's lost future. James Jenkins, typically reserved and a man of few words, spoke with the profound, quiet strength of his daughter's boundless potential, of her infectious laughter that once filled their home, now replaced by a chilling, permanent silence. Their testimony humanized Sarah, transforming her from a cold case file, a victim on a police report, into the vibrant, living, breathing young woman she once was, allowing the jury to feel the crushing weight of her absence. The jury, after days of intense, somber deliberation, grappling with the weight of the evidence and the profound implications of their decision, returned a verdict of guilty. Michael Henderson was convicted of the capital murder of Sarah Jenkins. The courtroom erupted in a tumultuous mixture of gasps, sobs, and choked cries of relief, a raw, powerful release of 2 decades of pent-up grief, frustration, and righteous anger. Eleanor Jenkins, tears streaming down her face, clutched her husband's hand, her body trembling, a complex tapestry of emotions swirling within her. Sorrow for Sarah, profound relief that her killer had been brought to account, anger at the monstrous betrayal, and a flicker of something akin to a fragile peace, a quiet sense of justice finally served. The sentencing phase followed quickly. Given the egregious nature of the crime, the implied premeditation of the abduction, the sheer brutality of Sarah's death, and the profound, lasting impact on the victim's family and the entire community, the prosecution sought a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The judge, his voice heavy with the gravity of the moment, citing the profound and irreparable damage inflicted, handed down the maximum sentence allowed by law: life imprisonment. Henderson, stoic and utterly unrepentant to the very end, his face a mask of chilling indifference, showed no emotion, no flicker of remorse as the sentence was read, a final, chilling testament to his lack of humanity. The conviction of Michael Henderson brought an undeniable, profound sense of closure to the Jenkins family and the Third Ward, but it did not, and could never, erase the deep, persistent scars etched into their collective consciousness. The Third Ward slowly began the arduous process of healing, but the memory of Sarah Jenkins and the chilling revelation of her killer's identity would forever serve as a cautionary tale, a somber reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal lives. It underscored the profound fragility of trust, the insidious, pervasive nature of evil that can masquerade as benevolence, and the enduring, unwavering power of a family's boundless love and relentless determination in the relentless pursuit of truth. The unsolved mystery in many ways transformed. The who was finally unequivocally answered, but the why remained, and likely will forever remain, cloaked in the darkest, most inaccessible corners of a disturbed mind. Why Sarah? Was it a random, impulsive outburst of violence? A long-simmering rage that found its terrifying release? Or was it something far more calculated, a twisted desire for control, a predatory urge directed at a bright, independent young woman who dared to shine too brightly? These questions, though unanswerable by a courtroom, continue to haunt, to echo in the quiet moments of reflection, a silent testament to the enduring enigma of human darkness. The true depth of Michael Henderson's depravity, the specific chain of events that led him to intercept Sarah on that fateful July night, and the internal calculus that allowed him to live a brazen, monstrous lie for over 2 decades, will likely remain forever locked within his own twisted, impenetrable psyche, a final, chilling secret taken to his grave. Perhaps some mysteries are never truly solved, only redefined, their shadows stretching onward into eternity. The community's struggle with the revelation of Michael Henderson's true nature was not a wound that would heal quickly or cleanly. It was a deep, festering trauma that exposed the very vulnerability of their social fabric. The ease with which a monster had worn the mantle of a saint, moving among them, sharing their sacred spaces, baptizing their children, offering solace in times of grief, shook the Third Ward to its very core. Trust, that delicate, invisible glue that binds communities, fractured into a million shards. Every handshake now felt suspect. Every kind smile held a potential for hidden malice. Every comforting word, a ghost of Henderson's insidious deceit. People began to look at their neighbors, their friends, even their own family members with a newfound, unsettling caution, a quiet questioning that had never existed before. The easy camaraderie that once defined their block parties, their church picnics, their spontaneous porch conversations, was replaced by a subtle, almost imperceptible layer of guardedness, a cautious distance. The barbershop, once a vibrant epicenter of community life, where generations of men had shared stories, wisdom, and laughter, became a stark, silent memorial to lost innocence, a painful reminder of how easily appearances could deceive. Its dark windows reflected the somber mood of the street, its peeling paint a metaphor for the erosion of faith in what was once held sacred. For Eleanor and James Jenkins, the conviction brought a strange, heavy quiet. The relentless, exhausting campaign for justice had finally culminated, but the victory felt hollow, tinged with a bitterness that no amount of time could sweeten. There was relief, yes, a profound physical lightness that came from no longer carrying the suffocating weight of the unknown, the gnawing uncertainty of Sarah's fate. But that relief was perpetually overshadowed by the crushing burden of betrayal. How many times had Michael Henderson offered James a firm handshake, his eyes meeting his with what seemed like genuine sympathy? How many times had he embraced Eleanor, his arm a comforting weight around her shoulders, while all along the truth of his monstrous act festered beneath his carefully constructed facade? That specific memory of his false condolences at Sarah's funeral was a recurring nightmare for Eleanor, a toxic poison seeping into her quiet moments, leaving her breathless with rage and a chilling nausea. The man who comforted them was the very man who had stolen their daughter's life. It was a psychological torment that continued to haunt their waking hours and infiltrate their dreams, a perverse dance of memory and horror. They had poured their grief into the Sarah Jenkins Scholarship Fund, watching with pride as young, aspiring students, echoing Sarah's own bright ambition, received aid to pursue their dreams at Texas Southern University. Each scholarship awarded was a bittersweet victory, a tangible way to keep Sarah's spirit alive, to channel their enduring sorrow into something positive, something that honored her unwavering belief in the power of education. But even these moments of hope were underscored by the permanent, aching void her absence left. Detective Marcus Thorne, though a veteran of countless grim cases, found himself grappling with the lingering echoes of the Jenkins case long after the verdict was delivered. The satisfaction of a case closed, a killer brought to justice, was undeniable, a quiet triumph in his relentless pursuit of truth. Yet the profound why continued to gnaw at him, a silent question mark lingering in the quiet moments of his commute home, or when staring out his office window into the bustling city below. He had seen the depths of human depravity before, but Henderson's meticulously maintained double life, his successful infiltration of a trusting community, his brazen willingness to participate in the mourning he himself had caused, spoke to a level of psychopathy that was particularly chilling. It was a calculated, cold-blooded performance that defied easy categorization, a stark reminder that evil often did not announce itself with overt signs, but festered silently, subtly, beneath layers of false virtue. Thorne understood that justice was rarely a clean, satisfying equation, but rather a complex, often messy resolution that left its own set of wounds. He often thought of Eleanor and James, of the quiet dignity they carried despite their immeasurable pain, and he knew that for them, closure was not an ending, but a new, arduous chapter in their lifelong journey of grief and remembrance. The case reinforced his belief that the human heart, capable of immense love and compassion, was also, terrifyingly, capable of unimaginable darkness, and that his work, at its core, was a perpetual battle against that unseen, insidious shadow. The broader implications of the Sarah Jenkins case resonated far beyond the Houston city limits. It became a significant touchstone in the national conversation surrounding the pervasive, deeply ingrained issues of violence against Black women and girls. Activists, long frustrated by the glaring disparities in media attention, police resources, and public outcry when victims were Black, pointed to Sarah's decades-long cold case as a stark illustration of systemic neglect. Her story, though tragically common in its initial trajectory into obscurity, now served as a powerful rallying cry. It amplified the voices of countless other families, predominantly Black, who had experienced the same heartbreaking indifference, the same bureaucratic dismissiveness, the same agonizing wait for justice that often never came. Advocacy groups like the Black and Missing Foundation cited Sarah's case repeatedly, using its eventual resolution through advanced DNA technology as a bittersweet example of what could be achieved with renewed commitment and resources, while simultaneously highlighting the unacceptable delay. They argued that the cold status of such cases was not merely a matter of scientific limitation, but often a reflection of societal values and priorities that implicitly devalued the lives of certain segments of the population. The intense media scrutiny on Henderson's arrest and the widespread shock finally pushed the narrative into mainstream consciousness, forcing a painful but necessary reckoning with these uncomfortable truths. It ignited conversations in living rooms, community centers, and legislative chambers about the urgent need for equitable investigations, for cultural sensitivity training for law enforcement, and for proactive measures to protect vulnerable communities. The echoes of Sarah's life and her tragic death thus transcended the personal, becoming a powerful, enduring symbol of a wider struggle for recognition, for value, for justice, for all. Even in prison, Michael Henderson remained a figure shrouded in a chilling enigma. He steadfastly refused to speak about Sarah Jenkins or the events of that humid July night, maintaining a stony silence, an impenetrable facade of victimhood and denial. No confession, no sliver of remorse, no explanation for the monstrous act he had committed and so brazenly concealed for 23 years. Psychologists and criminologists would debate the nature of such a man. Was he a high-functioning psychopath, devoid of empathy, expertly mimicking human emotions? Or was he a narcissistic personality, so convinced of his own righteousness that he could rationalize any act, externalizing blame and seeing himself as the true victim of a wrongful accusation? The specific triggers, the precise dynamic that led him to target Sarah, remained a dark, unyielding mystery. Had her bright spirit, her unwavering confidence, her meticulous plans for a future of service somehow affronted his own twisted sense of order or his latent misogyny? Was it a sudden, opportunistic surge of power, a desire to exert control over a vibrant young woman who dared to embody independence? The investigators speculated that perhaps Sarah's refusal to yield, her brave struggle, as evidenced by the DNA beneath her fingernail, had only further fueled his rage, leading to the brutal escalation of violence. His life in prison would be lived in the same unrepentant silence, taking the full, horrifying truth of that night to his grave, leaving only fragments for others to piece together, forever denied the satisfying coherence of a motive understood. The Third Ward, though scarred, began its slow, painful journey toward healing, one conversation, one shared meal, one collective prayer at a time. The church, Antioch Missionary Baptist, became more than ever a sanctuary, a place where the community could gather to mourn, to reflect, and to begin the arduous work of rebuilding trust, not in individuals who might deceive, but in the collective strength of their shared faith and resilience. Pastors preached on themes of forgiveness, not necessarily for Henderson, but for themselves, for the community, to release the corrosive grip of bitterness and despair. They emphasized the importance of discernment, of looking beyond superficial appearances, of nurturing true community vigilance while guarding against paralyzing paranoia. The Sarah Jenkins Scholarship Fund continued to grow, fueled by donations from a community determined to ensure that Sarah's legacy would be one of empowerment and hope, not just of tragedy. Her name became synonymous with excellence, perseverance, and the enduring dream of a better future, a future she herself was denied but helped to forge for others. Each year, new scholarship recipients, often young Black women pursuing education and community service, would speak Sarah's name, carrying her torch forward, embodying the potential that was so cruelly stolen but not forgotten. The memory of Sarah Jenkins, therefore, persists not merely as a cold case victim, but as a vibrant, enduring spirit. She is remembered not for the way she died, but for the life she lived, a life full of passion, dedication, and an unshakable belief in the power of education and community. Her story became a testament to the fact that even in the face of unspeakable darkness, light can ultimately prevail, driven by the relentless pursuit of justice, the unwavering love of a family, and the quiet, persistent power of scientific advancement. Her case, once a symbol of the forgotten, became a beacon of remembrance, a catalyst for change, and a somber, powerful lesson for future generations about the deceptive nature of evil and the enduring quest for truth. The shadows, though long, eventually receded enough for the truth to emerge, illuminating the path forward, albeit one forever marked by loss. This deeply painful chapter in Houston's history serves as a stark reminder that the wounds of betrayal, particularly those inflicted by someone within one's own trusted circle, run deeper than any others. They challenge not just individual trust, but the very fabric of communal identity, forcing a reevaluation of what it means to truly know another person. The community learned, through heartbreaking experience, that vigilance must be tempered with compassion, and suspicion must not be allowed to erode the essential bonds of human connection. Yet, a part of their collective innocence was irrevocably lost that day, replaced by a more nuanced, cautious understanding of the world. The question of how well we know the monsters lurking in plain sight, living among us, smiling and shaking hands, will forever echo in the Third Ward, a haunting refrain that resonates long after the headlines fade, a constant whisper in the humid Houston air, urging eternal vigilance. The story of Sarah Jenkins, in its tragic scope and its eventual bitter triumph, stands as a chilling testament to the enduring power of darkness, but also, more profoundly, to the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to let evil have the final word. It asks us to look deeper, to question more, and to never, ever forget the vibrant lives extinguished by the shadows and the tireless efforts of those who bring the truth, however painful, into the light.